All right, it's 10 o'clock. We'll get started. The recording is going on right now. Quickly, what we'll be doing today is getting you prepped for the work that you'll be doing from Chapter 26 for this upcoming week. We'll be taking a look at the Vietnam War together. And in particular, what we'll be doing is we'll be breaking apart the textbook entries with video as well, and explainers that I'll be able to put together for you to kind of get the big ideas of what you're supposed to be pulling out. What we've been advised to do with our school is we will be teaching you Monday through Thursday this week. Friday and Monday, we're supposed to be working in our own teacher groups to figure out what the rest of the year is going to look like, especially when it comes to wrapping up the courses and doing final exams. And so Friday and Monday, you will not be getting work from me. But if you are one of my AP Bio people in particular, you are 3 weeks away from your AP test. And my hope is that your review process is going well. If you're anything like my AP US History kids, you are in a really good place 3 weeks out, given the fact that for content, you've probably got your coverage taken care of. But for us, especially, this is the time of year that we typically in our classes encourage you to ramp up your content review, especially for stuff that might be tricky for you. And that's the way that you enhance your ability to get good scores on the AP test. So hopefully my class is doable, be able to get your stuff done and be good. If you're falling behind and you're having troubles, please alert me when you turn stuff in. I was able to get a good amount of stuff thrown into the grade book over the weekend. I'll be doing more this upcoming week. So your grades should look more and more accurate as we move forward. And if you are wrestling with the being away from friends and school and whatever, and you're feeling low or anything like that, keep in mind that we feel the same way. My wife and I are both teaching, and we feel moody and sad about the fact that we don't get to hang around with you guys. And I've got 2 kids here at home who are also feeling the fact that school is not just academics, but it's also being around friends. And so hopefully you're doing okay. But if you need any sort of help or you're having any sort of problems, let me know. And then, like I mentioned, if you do get stuff done after deadlines pop up, we want to be pacing your stuff out so you've got a doable amount of stuff to do on a daily basis, but we don't want you to be overwhelmed. Let me grab my door, by the way. Hold on just a second. All right. So what you were asked to look at over the past weekend, your homework was from Friday, completing your short answer assessment that you guys had. And so hopefully that's been submitted and that went well. Shoot, I forgot to turn on the presentation. So present now. There we go. So short answer assessment should have been done at that time. You were asked to look at the first of the ED puzzles on the Vietnam War, answering questions 1 through 9 from your video worksheet. If you were having trouble with that or have questions or problems, this is what today is supposed to be for. So I can help you out with any questions or problems that you guys are having with that Vietnam video worksheet. So feel free to ask if that is something that you need help with. Let me see here. And the way that I grade these out is I check to see when you are doing this assignment, I check to see, have you watched the video all the way through? And so when you're working with your stuff right here, let me bring you to what I'm seeing from my perspective. So when I look at your scoring, like I'm looking at Sam and Brett, you've watched 90% of the 100% you're supposed to watch, which means you're almost to the point of getting credit, but you won't get full credit. If you are sitting at that point, you got to watch the video all the way through, get it to completion. Once I see 100%, then I know that you are good for that day. If you are in the 0% range, your grade is obviously in danger, but you've got time to fix that up. So please make sure you watch this all the way through, get your questions done on your video worksheet. And like I mentioned, I'll be checking the chat right here in just a second to see if there's any things that happen, questions 1 through 9, that were throwing you off. What I would like you to do for today then, before you come to the class tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm going to want you to do lesson 2 from your textbook so that you're able to understand what impact the Vietnam War had on people in the United States. And in particular, when we take a look at the Vietnam War, this is a war that very much changes how the United States reacts to conflicts. Now, you'll remember when we started off this course, George Washington had advised America to be careful about getting involved in European conflicts But that was during a time where our country was very weak. It wasn't economically developed. It wasn't militarily developed. We barely won the American Revolution with French aid. At this point, though, we're a superpower. We've got the strongest economy on the face of the planet, the largest military on the face of the planet. And what we discovered during the Vietnam War, and I'll bring you to this map right here, America had a sense of overconfidence when we went into the Vietnam War, with the idea that with our strong military, we should be able to resolve conflicts, especially with the Truman Doctrine, that we should be able to stop the spread of communism around the world. Now, the problem with that is, number one, that's a super expensive proposition because wars are never cheap. Secondarily, though, for most Americans, here's where the United States is. Hawaii is out here. Here's Vietnam. Most Americans, when the Vietnam War got started, they didn't even know where Vietnam was on the map, much less understand what was going on in Vietnam. So when the United States government under Lyndon Johnson explained the Vietnam conflict, they explained that the communist North Vietnamese wanted to take over the not communist South Vietnamese. And to Americans, that sounded very cut and dried, that we would be welcomed as protectors of South Vietnam. Your dilemma, though, is in South Vietnam, you had people who were living under a dictator who was friendly to the United States. And for many of the people in this country, they were feeling nationalistic. They were very much feeling that they wanted independence. They didn't want to be dominated by outside countries. And in particular, in Vietnam, the French had colonized in the late 1800s. Then Japan took control during the World War II. Then the French retook control and tried to hold on to Vietnam until they were beaten at Dien Bien Phu during the Eisenhower presidency. And then after after Dien Bien Phu, the French left and the Americans started sending supplies and what they called advisors into Vietnam. These were our Green Berets. And for John F. Kennedy, he believed in something called flexible response, where instead of just relying on nuclear weapons, we had nuclear weapons plus the regular military, plus we had special forces like our Green Berets that we trained, who could go in and train soldiers in South Vietnam. But more and more, our Green Berets were also getting involved in fighting in South Vietnam against a group called the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong were people in South Vietnam who were sympathetic with North Vietnam and their communist leader, Ho Chi Minh. And so they were fighting against the United States here, and they weren't wearing uniforms. They would just dress as regular civilians, and then they would engage in like sabotage or destruction or attacks in the middle of the night, and then they would disappear during the daytime, and they would blend in with everybody else because they weren't wearing official uniforms. They were getting supplies from the Ho Chi Minh Trail that ran through Laos and Cambodia nearby, which were countries that we were not officially at war with. We were only officially at war in Vietnam. So they could move supplies along this trail without too much harassment from the United States, even though we knew this was going on. And over the years that the Vietnamese had been fighting back against the French and the Japanese, they had built up tunnel systems like this. These are the Cu Chi tunnels that are just west of the cities here in Vietnam. And these tunnel systems ran into the major cities down here, and allowed people to go into tunnels, hide from the American bombing campaigns, pop up after the bombing was done, and they could get into the cities, get supplies, go back out here. And so for American soldiers, this type of fighting was horribly bad. For the United States, we had really great weapons. We had planes, we had bombs, we had tanks, we had nuclear weapons. None of those things are great for this style of guerrilla warfare that we're forced to get into. And so instead of being a very quick war, this becomes a very long, difficult, drawn out war for the United States. In this sort of fighting, then, you're going to end up with two different groups. You're going to end up with a group called the Hawks, who in the 1960s are going to argue that the Vietnam War is winnable if we just fight harder. And you also end up with the Doves, which are peace activists who feel like we should not be in the Vietnam War. It is not winnable. And our country is incredibly divided then over what should be happening with Vietnam. Even worse, we're operating a draft. And in the draft, the people who end up finding themselves drafted successfully are the poorest people in our society, because we do have ways to avoid getting drafted, like either having a doctor say that you cannot serve, or else if you go to college, then you're allowed to dodge the draft. And so we have a lot of people in the military who are there by force, who are in a war that more and more seems like a really difficult, hard war to be able to work their way through. What we're going to find then, and this is what you'll be taking a look at today, is it says here, I'm going to want you to find 3 reasons why Americans were opposed to or began to oppose the war. And then we're going to take a look here and we're going to see that this war is so devastating to Lyndon Johnson, where he had been focused on the Great Society, ending poverty in the United States, and the civil rights movement to try to address the issues of civil rights. He got deeply involved in the Vietnam War with the idea that our country was so powerful and their country was so small that this war should be super easy to win. He could then prove that he was tough on communism, would get reelected in 1968. Instead, he's going to have to give up the presidency in 1968 because the war is going so badly, and it will lead to the election of Richard Nixon. During the Nixon presidency, he will have his own problems with the Vietnam conflict, which we'll study later on this week. So that's what I'd like you to get done. I'd like you to get these text questions taken care of for today. So when we come back together, we should be in good shape. My hope, though, is that when you take a look back at these questions, you are feeling good about your text assignment as well as the video that you've been watching. And what I'll do is if you need any help with either the video or with Chapter 26, Lesson 1, I'm going to hang on for just a little bit and check the chat until all of you guys drift off. And then I will post the recording so that if you want to check later on the day, you should be good. But if you're feeling good about that assignment and you're ready to get rolling with it, you can take off at this point. Just make sure you fill out the attendance form and keep me in the loop if you're having any sort of problems. And again, if you are missing old stuff, if it's hurting your grade, let me know, get that stuff done and submit it to me so that you guys are good. Have a great day. It's supposed to be beautiful outside. Great day for studying out in the sun. Let me know if I can help out in any way. See you guys.